You're listening to Coffee and Sports from Wire to Wire Sports Network on the National Streaming Sports Roku channel.
Good morning and welcome. It is Coffee and Sports. It is the morning show powered by Wire to Wire Network. I am Chris. Thank you so much for making us part of your morning routine. I am riding solo this morning. My partner Mo will be back with us tomorrow. Let's open the show with this, guys. Obviously, the big news from over the weekend is Mr. Juan Soto signing with the New York Mets. The inboxes are blowing up as a Yankee fan. I do know a couple of Met fans. They are over the moon, absolutely over the moon about this signing. So let's start let's start with the Yankee side of it, right? So obviously, let's be honest. The Yankees wanted Juan Soto. The Yankees went all in to get Juan Soto. As a Yankee fan, I'm not going to sit here this morning and I'm not going to say that it was a bad deal by the Mets, because essentially the Yankees tried to make the same exact deal. So for me to sit here and be like, oh, shucks, who's going to protect Soto in the lineup? He's not worth that much money. He's just going to be a glorified DH in 4 or 5 years, which, by the way, are all true things. But they're all true things that the Yankees wanted to sign up for. I mean, with Juan Soto, you are looking at a player who, for the next 5 or 6 years, is probably going to be worth every penny of the contract that he just signed. He doesn't get hurt. He is a terrific young player. He is going to have tremendous offensive production. He's 26 years old. So for the next 6 years or so, up until he's 32, 33, tremendous output, right? Then the output's going to start to take a dip, because that's what happens with all Major League Baseball players. And while that's happening, you also have someone who is bad in the outfield. Now, you can look at it and be like, well, Chris, we watched him as a Yankee and he's bad. If you actually look at the next gen stats, he is a terrible outfielder. But that being said, the Yankees still wanted him. I'm not disparaging him, because the Yankees still wanted him. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, the Yankees, and I saw a lot of Reddit boards yesterday, and I saw a lot of things on Bleacher Report. I saw a lot of things on Facebook, and sometimes people just don't look into stuff before they speak, guys. The Yankees were not outbid by $5 million. Let's get rid of that misconception first, because that's the big one I saw right away. Well, how can you lose out on Juan Soto by $5 million? That's not what happened. Yes, was the Mets offer worth $5 million more overall? Yeah, it was. But the Yankees offer was 16 years. The Mets offer was 15 years. So although the entire offer was $5 million more from the Mets, annually, Juan was making a good chunk less with the Yankees, because there was an extra year factored in. That's number one. Number two, the Yankees offer didn't have a kicker in it. Juan Soto, with the Mets, he can leave that team in 5 years. He can opt out of his contract in 5 years, okay? At which point, the Mets can void his opt-out, agree to pay him more money, and his $765 million contract becomes an $805 million contract. Now, why would Juan not do that? Why would he not opt out in 5 years just to make more money? I mean, the only way the Mets would let him walk in 5 years would be if the next 5 seasons are absolutely horrible. He would have to be injury plagued. He would have to be literally a shell of himself over the next 5 seasons for him to opt out and the Mets not to bring him back in and turn this $765 million contract into an $805 million contract. So that's something else the Yankees didn't have in their offer to Juan Soto. And then last but not least, let's not forget, the Mets said from day one, we will outbid any high bid by $50 million. The Yankees were never going to be the highest bid for Juan Soto. It was never going to happen. The Mets have more money. I am shocked the Yankees even got up to $760 million. Absolutely shocked. I didn't think they'd cross 7. I thought they would hang out somewhere in the 650 to 680 range. I thought they would make a competitive offer, and I thought someone like Boston or the Mets would completely overpay for him. And then the narrative would be, the Yankees just didn't want to give the money. I was wrong. The Yankees wanted to give the money, but they were never going to be the highest bid. They were always going to be the second highest because the Mets made it clear from day one they would top any bid by $50 million. And that's essentially what they did here. The way this contract works out, it would be overall $45 million higher than what the Yankees offered overall. So at the end of the day, what does it come down to? Well, it's going to come down to one of two things. Now, Juan's going to say all the right things. He's going to say, he wants to be a Met and he wants to help the organization. He's going to say all the right things. But it comes down to one of two things. He either didn't want to be a Yankee, which, sorry, Yankee fans, sometimes people don't want to play for us. It's the way it works. Or he wanted the most money. And the most money and the biggest contract in sports history was always going to come from the Mets. Now, could he have taken the $760 from the Yankees and had the biggest contract in sports history? Yes, he could have. But he's leaving $50 million on the table. Would you have left $50 million on the table? That's where we are. And whether he's playing for the money or he's playing for the recognition of having the biggest sports contract, $805 million is what this could ultimately be. It's his choice. He has earned that right. He has earned the right to play for the most money. He has earned the right to play for the biggest contract. He has earned the right to turn someone down just because their numbers were $45 million less. He's earned that right. So at the end of the day, this is where we are. Juan Soto is a Met for the next 15 years. Now, what happens next if you're a Yankee fan? I'm okay losing out on Juan Soto if the Yankees take the Juan Soto money. Because now we know, right? Now as a Yankee fan, you know they were going to give 16 years, $760 million. So as a Yankee fan, what are we going to do with that money? Because if you were willing to spend it on Soto, hopefully you're still willing to spend it on this upcoming season and a few more seasons after that to make this team better. So if losing out on Juan Soto means the Yankees get a starting pitcher or two, a bullpen arm, and another bat in the outfield, okay. Let's roll the dice and see what happens. Now, if losing out on Juan Soto means the Yankees are going to try to replace losing out on Juan Soto with one player, that's a different story. You can't do that, right? You can't. there isn't one player out there that the Yankees are going to sign or trade for where you're like, oh, okay, that's about the same. That's not going to happen. So if the Yankees turn the Juan Soto money into 3 or 4 quality pieces, which I think they can do, then we're good. And we're probably better off. Because who knows with the Juan Soto deal, had the Yankees signed Juan Soto, is that the only deal they make? Is that the biggest move they make? And are the rest of them tiny moves? Without Juan Soto, is it possible they can make 2 big moves, a medium-sized move, and a small move? I don't know. We'll see where the pieces fall. I will say, looking at the New York Mets lineup this morning, you better get somebody in there to protect Juan Soto. Because if you don't have someone to protect him, you might get San Diego Padre numbers and not New York Yankee, Washington National numbers. Remember, in Washington, Bryce Harper was in that lineup. In New York, Aaron Judge was in that lineup. With the Padres, sometimes Tatis was in that lineup. Sometimes a good hitting Manny Machado was in that lineup. Completely different story. So if I'm the Mets, maybe you got to re-sign your first baseman. Maybe that's the protection you need. But you need to have somebody to protect Juan Soto in that lineup. Otherwise, it's going to be an issue. But we'll see. New York Met fans, you have every right to be celebrating this morning. It is not often the Mets poach something from the Yankees, and that is exactly what happened yesterday. So Mets fans, revel in it, celebrate it. You deserve it. Big day for you guys. And then we'll see what the New York Yankees do moving forward. All right, let's jump to the NFL. We're going to run through some NFL stuff. Mo's going to be back here tomorrow. When Mo's back here tomorrow, we're going to run through some NFL stuff with him as well. But let's kind of go through some of the biggest takeaways from the NFL day yesterday. First of all, the Miami Dolphins keep their slim playoff hopes alive with a comeback win versus the New York Jets. Tua Tagovailoa is playing great football this season. I believe he has the highest completion percentage in the league. I think he has the second or third highest passer rating in the league. He's doing great things right now. The defense is a mess. The defense is giving up way too many yards, way too many points. Do I think the Dolphins make the playoffs? Honestly, today, no. I think there's too much that needs to happen. But the opportunity is there. And here's why the opportunity is there. So Miami finishes the season with Houston, San Francisco, Cleveland, and the Jets. Those are all winnable games. Now, could they just as easily lose to Houston and San Francisco? Absolutely. But if they beat those teams, you're not sitting here shocked and surprised. Houston has looked vulnerable at times this season. San Francisco has looked very vulnerable at times this season. Cleveland is not a good football team, and they just beat the Jets. So to sit here and say Miami can't win their last 4 games, if you're saying that, you're clearly a Buffalo Bills fan or a Jets fan or just a Dolphin hater. They definitely can win their last 4. But Miami does not control their own destiny. They need help to get in. So even if they finish 10-7, they could still easily miss the playoffs altogether. The question is, what happens with the 5 teams around them? The Ravens, the Chargers, the Broncos, the Colts, who they're competing with for a wild card spot with, and the Houston Texans, who are leading their division right now. But depending on what happens with the Colts, that could factor in. Well, let's take a look at the 3 wild card teams: Baltimore, the Chargers, and Denver. Baltimore has 2 potential losses on their schedule right now. They're going to beat the Giants this upcoming weekend. No issue there. They have Pittsburgh in 2 weeks. That could be a loss. They have Houston in 3 weeks. That could be a loss. And they should close out with a win against the Cleveland Browns. So if they lose to Pittsburgh and Houston, they're 10-7. The Chargers have the easiest remaining schedule. If they beat Tampa Bay next weekend, they probably run the table. I think the Chargers, I think they lose to Tampa, and then I think they beat Denver, New England, and Las Vegas. I think the Chargers finish 11-6, and they're not even in this conversation. I think they're the top wild card going into the playoffs. Then we have your Denver Broncos. Denver has Indy, the Chargers, Cincinnati, and Kansas City. Denver's interesting because I think Denver loses to the Chargers and Kansas City. I think those are 2 losses. Those 2 losses right there put them at 10-7. But they also have Indy and Cincinnati. Now, I think they win those games, but they could lose those games. They could lose to Indy. They could lose. Indy needs to beat Denver next weekend. Those are their playoffs. Indy needs to not finish. They need to do what Miami needs to do. They got to run this. They got to run the table. So Indy can't lose another game. That's a playoff game for the Colts. I'm not saying the Colts are going to win it, but that's it. Because if you look at the Colts schedule, if the Colts beat Denver, they are in business. After Denver, Tennessee, the New York Giants, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Colts have the easiest remaining schedule of anyone either just in the playoff bubble or just outside the playoff bubble. If the Colts beat Denver, they should finish 10-7, which is going to put pressure on some of these other teams, specifically the Houston Texans. Houston right now is 8-5. If Houston loses to Miami, that gives them 6 losses. They then have to play Kansas City and Baltimore next. If they lose one of those games, they're now 7 losses, with the possibility of the very real possibility of the Colts having the same record. If they lose the second game, so if Houston loses to Miami and then they turn around and lose to Kansas City, they're now a 7-loss team. That means to avoid being an 8-loss team, they got to beat Baltimore. If they lose to Baltimore, they're 8 losses. At that point, I think Indy wins the division. Because if Indy beats Denver, all they got to do is take care of business against Tennessee, the Giants, and the Jaguars. Now, I get it. Indy cannot be trusted. But Tennessee, the Giants, and the Jaguars, those are not good football teams. The division would be wide open for Indy to take it at that point. A lot can still happen. That being said, I do think Miami finishes 10-7, and I think they barely miss the playoffs. Let's talk about a few other things from yesterday. The Buffalo Bills. Guys, it was the Josh Allen show yesterday. Josh Allen puts on the cape. 3 rushing touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns, and the Buffalo Bills lose 44-42. This is what we can't have if you are the Buffalo Bills. You cannot have Superman Josh Allen. Because when Superman Josh Allen comes into play, this is what happens sometimes. You lose games like this. Josh Allen was their entire offense yesterday. Now, granted, it led them to 42 points. So it wasn't that bad. I'm not saying Josh played bad yesterday. Josh played great yesterday. 342 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 82 yards rushing on 10 attempts, 3 touchdowns, no turnovers. But that's it. There is nobody else besides Josh Allen. James Cook, 6 carries. 6 carries for 20 yards. Curtis Samuel, 1 carry for 1 yard. So Josh Allen, 10 carries, 82 yards. The rest of the team, 7 carries for 21 yards. It was the Josh Allen show yesterday, and you lost. And you didn't lose to the Chiefs. You didn't lose to the Ravens. You didn't lose to the Lions or the Eagles. You lost to the Rams. Buffalo needs to remain a balanced football team. End of story. Every game is different. Every result is different. But when Josh Allen is Superman, it's a 50-50 proposition in my eyes. Because when he's Superman, he plays great regardless, right? But when you're not balanced, Buffalo opens the door to start losing football games. And this right here is probably the most unbalanced they've been all season. And despite how great Josh Allen looked, they took a loss. Now, on the flip side of things, if you look at the Rams numbers, Matt Stafford, 320 yards, 20 yards less than Josh Allen on 7 less attempts, 2 touchdowns. The difference is they were balanced. They ran the ball over 40 times against Buffalo. Kyren Williams, 29 carries, 87 yards. The backup running back had 8 for 34, and Puka Nacua had 5 for 16. Balanced. Over 40 yards, over 40 rushing attempts, 30 passing attempts. They got other people involved in the offense. I'm not killing Buffalo this morning. They put up 42 points. I thought they were going to come back and win the game. I didn't give the Rams a chance because the Rams defense could not stop them. But early on in this game, the difference was before Josh Allen became heroic in the second half, the difference early in this game was that Buffalo couldn't establish a running game. And then in the end, Josh Allen putting on the cape couldn't overcome it. He almost did. It was awesome to watch, but he fell just a little short. How about those Kansas City Chiefs? Guys, sometimes a team is just charmed. It's another close game, 19-17. The Chargers have a great third quarter. They take the lead at the end of the third quarter. They take the lead with about 4 minutes to play. The Chiefs drive down the field. Patrick Mahomes to Kelsey with 2 minutes to go inside the 10-yard line. They're able to run the clock all the way down because the Chargers have no timeouts left. And then at that point, it's automatic. They're not going to miss the field goal. And then they almost do. Doinks it right off the upright. But you know what? It's the Chiefs, baby. So it doinks right in. Sometimes a team is just charmed. And the Kansas City Chiefs are that. Now, usually what happens is at the end of these games, it's the other team having some weird, miraculous screw-up that's leading the Chiefs to a victory. This time it was the Chiefs with the almost screw-up. But it still worked out in their favor. The Chiefs are still the only one-loss team in the NFL. With Buffalo losing, there it is. They are going to be the number 1 seed, guys. The 49ers bounced back against the Chicago Bears. Congrats to the Seattle Seahawks for putting a stranglehold on their division. Even though the Rams won and are only 1 game back, that was still impressive. The Saints have won 3 out of 4 games with their interim head coach. That's impressive. Props to the Steelers for knocking off the Cleveland Browns. Kirk Cousins will probably not be the starting quarterback in Atlanta much longer after a dismantling by his former team, the Minnesota Vikings. The Baker train just rolled into first place. The Panthers continue to play close football games. The Jaguars-Titan game was borderline unwatchable. The Lions cemented themselves as the best team in the NFC North with their victory over the Packers. And then tonight, we have the Dallas Cowboys and the Cincinnati Bengals. Big game for the Cowboys. The Cowboys are trying to get back to 6-7. The Cowboys are still alive. If you are a Dallas fan and you are sitting here this morning, let's take a look at the NFL standings because I wrote the Cowboys off a couple of weeks ago. I said the Cowboys were dead in the water. Nothing was going to happen with this team. I still believe that. But as we sit here this morning and we look out across the landscape of the NFC, a win tonight gets Dallas to 6-7. What does that mean? Well, the Eagles are 11-2, the Rams are 8-5, the Lions are 12-1, the Bucks are 7-6. Those are your division leaders right now. What does the wild card look like? It looks like the Commanders with 5 losses, the Vikings with 2 losses, the Packers with 4 losses, and then the Commanders with 5 losses. It is exactly what is happening in the AFC. With the Dolphins and the Colts, they have 7 losses at 6-7, and they're trying to chase down a 5-loss team. That would be the same situation in the NFC if the Dallas Cowboys win tonight. They will have 7 losses, and they're trying to chase down a 5-loss team, which is the Washington Commanders. So Dallas would very much still be alive in the playoff race if they get a victory tonight. They are 2 games behind the Commanders at that point. So if you're the Dallas Cowboys, now keep in mind, they're not the only team in that position. The Rams are in a better spot. The Rams are 1 game behind the Commanders. And then you have the Falcons, the Niners, and the Cardinals, who would all be tied with Dallas in the same position. So not ideal, but they would still be alive. So the question at that point becomes, what does the Commanders' schedule look like the rest of the season? Because are they going to lose 2 or 3 more games and open the door for someone to come in and take the final wildcard spot? Well, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, you play them. So that's good news for you because you need to make up 2 games and you play them and you've already beaten them. So that's good. You take care of business the last week of the season. You only need Washington to lose 1 other game before the end of the year, and they play the Saints, who are actually playing good football right now as far as winning. It doesn't look great, but they've won 3 out of 4. They play the Eagles. That could be a loss right there. And they're home to the Falcons. The Falcons are a disaster, but maybe Michael Penix starts that game. The Commanders have losable games on their schedule. They have a Falcons team who's going to be playing for a wild card spot. They have an Eagles team who they're one of the best teams in the NFC. They have a Saints team who's been playing good football the last 3 out of 4 weeks. And they have the Dallas Cowboys. So it's not over. It's not over if you're Dallas if you win tonight. If Dallas loses tonight, signed, sealed, delivered. It's done. Stop talking about the playoffs. Dallas, you can start talking about next season. So with that said, Bengals, Cowboys tonight. I'm going to go Cowboys. I think with the playoffs still potentially on the line, I think in Dallas, I think Dallas finds a way to win this game and keep their playoff hopes alive for at least 1 more week. And that's where we're going to be. But where are we going to be? We are going to be back here tomorrow morning. Mo will be with us tomorrow morning, making his return to Coffee and Sports. We are going to break down every single NFL game tomorrow with Mo. We're going to get his take on the Juan Soto deal. We're going to talk a little NBA basketball, all of that, and much, much more. Coffee and Sports. It's the morning show, powered by Wire to Wire Network.